So after going to Boston, I studied protein microarrays, and got into the world of antibodies through autoantibodies involved in like diabetes and other organ-specific autoimmune diseases. But after that, I was like, okay, antibodies are really interesting. So what we do now is I work with a guy who developed essentially a way to generate antibodies that does not require the use of animals.
Oh, okay.
So back in the 70s, there's a couple of guys who developed this very, very savvy kind of way of generating antibodies by inoculating mice, pulling their B cells, their antibody producing cells out of the mouse, fusing them with a cancer cell that would divide ad nauseum, ad infinitum, and produce antibodies of a single clonal specificity, which allowed us to basically harness the power of antibodies for biomedical science. So now we do this without animals, which I think is, as scientists, we have an ethical obligation that if we don't need to use animals for something, we shouldn't.
Right.
But I've also seen, it's been very interesting to see the interplay of the world of politics,
right,
and ethics, and money, and kind of the pushback, because some interesting insights and experiences that I had, but to kind of draw a loop around this is really what we're engaged in now. What I'm engaged in now is mostly engineering antibodies, developing antibodies to different targets, and then looking at trying to determine whether or not they have therapeutic potential. Really, antibodies are a novel, relatively novel. I think the first one was patented in the mid-1980s, and since then have become one of the fastest growing segments of the pharmaceutical industry.
That's fascinating. Does this stuff, and now I'm dangerously close to just like, and now's the time of the show when we just repeat shit you heard on Joe Rogan. But like, does this stuff have anything to do with like, or is this anywhere near like the CRISPR stuff or the?
Yeah, well, not.
Because CRISPR is more specifically DNA, right?
Yes, okay. Exactly. You're knocking things out with CRISPR. You're knocking things out often. Sometimes I think also knocking them in. So it's been a way to do. Actually, we do some work with a lab that works specifically with CRISPR.
Okay.
CRISPR libraries. So essentially, they'll apply these libraries, try to knock stuff out, and see what effect it has on the cells. But yeah, that's a very interesting area right now.
Super interesting, right? Because it's got all kinds of like weird. It's one of the fun ones where people get to go, you're gonna create fucking monsters.
Yeah, exactly. And really, what that is, the other side of that is the technology is by far outpacing the legal controls, the ethical controls, even the ethical considerations.
Yeah.
I think especially with CRISPR, scientists have realized, hey, this is a powerful technology, but we need to, before we use it to address, like what we were saying with some of these monogenic diseases, if you can basically target a single gene, you also have the opportunity to correct a disease before, at the stage of embryo, where this person could then go on and have a perfectly normal life. So it's powerful technology used ethically, but it's also like, okay, well, here's the gene for blue eyes. I want my child to have blue eyes, and it's like, well, is that an ethical use of that technology if there's a risk?
Do you think the conversation about that is any different than, say, if like when when electricity was first being used like as a thing that you could get out to the public? Well, it can power a light bulb, or you can kill people with it.
Yeah.
Like, isn't it kind of the same argument?
Yeah, well, I think that's the thing. Technology, I'm not going to say that it's ethically neutral entirely, but it really depends on how it's used. Like, no matter nuclear technology, electricity, genetic technologies, it all comes down to how is it going to be used. And the thing is, there are those who say, well, we need to use the technology for the betterment of humanity. And, up to a certain point in medical technologies, if we look back to, say, the discovery of insulin, patented.
Right.
Right? They said this is something amazing for humanity. This is what we give back.
There you go.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas nowadays the patent world is so almost integrated with the world of discovery and the world of innovation that really I think it's shifted to, well, how can we derive economic benefit from this technology?
Mm-hmm.
So which changes the ethics of it a little bit, because making money with certain risks, obviously becomes a little bit of an ethical conundrum.
It's because of the field, and I mean the entire history of science is sort of like fraught with that. I think 90% of the reason why, religion hung on for so long is because like science is kids playing with stuff that go boom, right? Like,
Yeah.
And I wonder how much of just being in that kind of a world where like, and I might be putting too fine a point on it, and it's really tough to have the perspective of the way I'm going to put this, but it's like you work in this world where like there are only a select amount of human beings that can even understand. Like I've gotten lost in our conversation 3 times. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so there's no. It's my lack of understanding, but there's only a select amount of human beings that can really talk about this stuff, really understand what the fuck you're talking about. Like really, like, yeah, I understand the subtleties and the nuances and the variance of all of this stuff. So you're in this place where like most of humanity looks at you people, right, as like fucking scary. But it's also the stuff that you're doing is far more important for all of us who are afraid of you than you could possibly understand. How do you is there a perspective on that? Is that a thing you have to deal with, or is it just like, oh, I'm doing what I'm doing, like whatever?
Well, like I'm personally under no illusions. I understand that there's people out there who know far more than I do about what I do.
Great. So there's a smaller circle of the small circle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think science, the representation of science in in greater society, can go in various directions. There's on one side of it. There's the science will save us, the technological kind of fetishism that's like no matter what the problem is, there will be a technological solution, which I think is a huge problem in society. But then there's the other side of society that's like, all vaccines are bad, all GMO is bad, and I'm like, unfortunately.
Well, you're eating your strawberry that is a GMO because it was not naturally grown like that.
Potentially, or even broccoli, which was bred over hundreds of years to actually what it is, which is also a form of genetic modification.
That's what I meant by the strawberry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's and it pains me on both sides to see both the technological fetishism, where it's like, oh, so that everything has a technological solution, because it doesn't. You know what? And sometimes the technological innovations come with their own set of problems, novel problems that are going to have to be solved at some point. We see that with plastics nowadays. See how plastics back in the 50s and 60s were just like
they're going to save the world.
Everything.
Remember the new modern kitchen where everything like rose out of everything was mechanical, and there was and then they realized, oh, that shit breaks down.
Yeah, exactly. And then plastics and everything made out of plastics. That's just like So
I mean, we have a nice new island.
Yeah. Maybe someday people will live there.
Right. Yeah. Just need a little more plastic. What's the problem?
So, but on the other side of that is the fear of science completely, and it's about having these discussions, and this is where I would love to see And I think I have a duty towards scientific literacy as well, to talk with people and not to talk to them in a condescending, your exclusive manner, but talk to them in a as understanding a manner as possible, so that we can kind of see that we need to have nuanced discussions about all of these things. Plastics, some people go, oh, plastics are good, blah blah. Well, yeah, they have their place, but as we see now, as they break down into the environment and bioaccumulate and are found in most of our bodies, what's the effect of that? Turning a blind eye to it and saying, oh, it doesn't matter. It's not a good plan. And same thing with vaccines. Yes, I understand there's vaccines for a multitude of things. We have to weigh things. And, unfortunately, the level of discussion nowadays that's fomented by social media is often, I find, very, it's not very open. You know what I mean? I saw.
Well, don't you know that science says that people who swear are geniuses?
Anytime I read something that says science says, I'm just like, hey, yeah. I'm like, well, which part of science?
Right.
Who's saying this? What's their?
That'll do it for this episode of the AVB Podcast. Don't forget you can subscribe to our full audio episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere you find your audio podcasts. The full episodes, highlights, and our live off-the-floor performance videos can be found at our YouTube channel, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram at the AVB Podcast. Of course, you'll find links to our incredible sponsors and this week's guest in the description below. The AVB Podcast is part of the Border City Network. Find more great content at bordercitynetwork.com. See you next time, folks. Bye-bye.